Hey everyone, this is my first YouTube video, so bear with me. I'm a microbiology major at the University of Florida, and as a result, I've learned a thing or two about evolution. The video I'll be responding to today is a commercial for this video series, which is intended for high school classroom use, which claims to be able to debunk evolution. After a bit of exposition with some questionable acting, which you'll get to see, the information really starts coming about a minute and 30 seconds in. More or less, we'll skip to there. Before we get started though, I'd like to define a few terms. Life is anything which has the capacity for self-replication and the capacity to undergo Darwinian evolution. Darwinian evolution is based on the idea that when DNA is replicated, mistakes are made. Over time, this leads to phenotypic changes, which can either hurt an organism or help it survive. Traits which help organisms survive are passed on to future generations. We call this natural selection. So with that in mind, let's get to it.
It just seems that it takes much more faith to believe in evolution than to believe in a designer.
Do you have any examples?
Well, how about when the textbook talks about the law of biogenesis, how life cannot come from non-life, but then in the next chapter it talks about how all life sprung from non-living material.
Okay, so I'm going to stop her right there. The first issue here is that there are two definitions of abiogenesis, and she's using one which doesn't really apply to science. The version of abiogenesis that she's referring to is spontaneous generation, which was an idea attributed to Aristotle. So spontaneous generation was this idea that life, like complex life, fully evolved complex life, could arise from something like inanimate. A common example of this is that people believed, for example, when meat decayed, if maggots appeared on it, the meat itself was producing the maggots. Finally, someone tested this, and they took some meat and they left it exposed to the air. Then they took some other meat and they left it sealed in the container, and they checked back 3 weeks later, and obviously the meat that was exposed was disgusting, and the meat that was sealed had no maggots. Now, this is taught in high school classes, but part of the problem here is that it leads to some confusion, because there's a second definition of abiogenesis. This would be the definition that concerns evolution relating to the theories behind the chemical origin of life on Earth, by which we attempt to explain how organic molecules on early Earth managed to chemically react in a way which allowed for self-replication. Think about it. Over time, chemical reactions which were self-propagating by nature would keep on going. Eventually, random changes allowed for information to be stored through the development of DNA. This is what's relevant to the student's claim that life can't come from non-life. Then there's her claim that all life sprung from non-living material, which is just false. Most high school bio classes will cover the Miller-Urey experiment, for example. In this experiment, the conditions of early Earth were simulated. The components of the early atmosphere, including methane, hydrogen, ammonia, water vapor, were all placed in an apparatus with boiling water to simulate an ancient ocean and electrodes to simulate early lightning. After only 1 week of this apparatus running, complex organic material had already formed. This process has been repeated to give us amino acids, complex lipids, even nucleic acid bases needed to make up DNA and RNA. So yeah, it's kind of reasonable to be able to say that life did kind of come from non-life.
And then it talks about mutation and natural selection and how it can change one animal into another, but mutation only loses information and natural selection can only choose from what's there. So how does a simple living organism turn into something like us?
This is my favorite part of the whole video. You can tell they think this is a great point, but I have no idea where they got this information from. Saying that mutations only lose information is just a false statement, and to unpack that a little bit, I'm going to have to go into a crash course on DNA. DNA is the genetic code which stores the information needed for an organism to carry out all of its functions. As an organism grows and its cells divide, the genetic code for each cell has to be copied. This is accomplished by unzipping the paired bases which make up the double helix and matching each base so that the order of the bases is retained, coding for the same information. Because life is imperfect, though, mistakes are made. Sometimes replication inserts the wrong base, sometimes a base is added or left out, causing all the following bases to be shifted, completely changing what it was supposed to code for. Usually, this can be bad news for an organism, but sometimes it can be beneficial. Essentially, no information is lost. It's just new information taking its place. It can be destructive, or harmless, or beneficial. And thanks to natural selection, It's the beneficial changes which end up being, usually, passed on to offspring. I also want to note that 4.5 billion years is much longer than our brains can even comprehend. It seems impossible, but over time, mutations do add up. So much so that they've led to all the biodiversity we observe today. Let me say it again. You don't understand how long 4.5 billion years is.
I mean, you have to think about, like, the complexity of the human eye and how we could never design something like that, or how the human body can heal itself.
For the sake of time, I'm not going to touch on this here, but if you take 30 seconds to Google either of those things, you'll see that there's nothing that remarkable about it, and they're not really being intellectually honest.
I just don't understand how some half-pound insect-eating shrew that somehow dodged whatever killed the dinosaurs could evolve from ape to ape-man over millions of unseen years, and then poof, you have humans.
They said unseen years because they'd have you believe that we don't have records of these things, which isn't true. We do. We're able to rationalize and account for all the time that's passed between the beginning of the Earth and today. And I'll say it again, 4.5 billion years is a long time, and we can't even comprehend it.
If evolution were true, we'd have millions of in-between creatures running around everywhere, right? And all of the in-between fossils could fit in the back of my Prius.
But here's the thing, is we do have millions of in-between creatures running around. Everything alive today is an in-between creature, so to speak, because evolution doesn't have an end goal. And every fossil is a transitional fossil.
And you know what else? I just don't understand how all of this started. I mean, you say that science doesn't rely on faith, but evolution requires faith. Faith that everything just burst out of nothing, that gas clouds collapsed and turned into stars, and all this stuff just collided around the sun to create planets, including Earth, that is just the right distance away from the sun to sustain life.
If the Earth hadn't been in the sun's habitable zone, we wouldn't be here talking about this.
It requires faith to believe that living organisms, created male and female, crawled out of the water and then magically became land-dwelling animals, which then became humans, all without intelligence or design. I just think it takes a lot more faith to believe in evolution than it does to believe that all the design, marvelous design around us points to a designer. And now I'm just rambling, so does anyone else have a question?
To close, I'd like to touch on the way that the filmmakers decided to show their students, classmates mocking her on social media. I think they made this choice because they think that the arguments they've presented are solid, and that the other kids in this room should be seen as ignorant for ignoring her and making fun of her because they're the ones who are brainwashed. But here's the thing. Most of the information that I've covered here today is information this girl would learn if she was willing to pay attention in a high school level bio lecture. The elephant in the room here is religion, because that's what this is really about. But maybe if this girl were willing to, I don't know, pay attention in a high school level bio lecture, she'd understand why it is that millions of Christians worldwide are able to believe in evolution. Thank you for watching.